Today is Saturday, November 7th. It is the weekend after Election Day, so today we're getting analysis from two different political strategists, one Democrat, one Republican. They're sharing how they feel about the presidential race right now, what they make of President Trump's legal challenges and claims, what they think this election says about America, and much more. First, you'll hear from conservative commentator Scott Jennings. He worked for President George W. Bush, has been a longtime political advisor to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He's a veteran of 4 presidential campaigns and is the founding partner of Run Switch PR in Louisville, Kentucky. He teaches courses at Harvard, Tufts University, and more. He's also a contributor to CNN, USA Today, and the LA Times. Then you'll hear from Democratic strategist Emily Tish Sussman. She's the host of the podcast Your Presidential Playlist and serves as a senior advisor to various organizations committed to driving progressive change. She's worked at the largest progressive think tank in Washington, D.C., the Center for American Progress, and has also contributed to various cable news stations from CNN to Fox News. So here's our conversations, starting with Scott Jennings. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, when we provide all the day's news in just 10 minutes. It's fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. It's time for today's Special Edition Saturday. You ready? Let's do this. Hi, Scott. Thanks for coming on the Newsworthy.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
So, as of this recording, Friday afternoon, Biden is in the lead. What's the feeling among Republicans right now?
Well, mixed emotions. Obviously, Republicans saw the furious comeback that Donald Trump made and hoped that he might be able to win the race, but is going to come up short, apparently. But at the same time, they're looking down the ticket at the better than expected results in the U.S. Senate and the congressional elections, where we've actually picked up seats in the U.S. House and in state legislatures and in governor's mansions around the country. It looks like the Republican Party outside of the presidency had a pretty good night. So mixed feelings. You hate to lose the presidency, but certainly Republicans put up a really strong fight that wasn't picked up by the pollsters and the pundits out there all year.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what happened in Congress. Do you think there were people that voted differently for presidency and representatives and senators?
Yeah, obviously there were a few ticket splitters out there who didn't vote for Donald Trump for one reason or another, but did vote for their Republican Senate candidate or their congressional candidate. Just look at Maine, where Susan Collins, there wasn't a single public poll all year in which Susan Collins led, yet she won her race while Donald Trump, of course, lost Maine. So there are obviously voters out there that don't mind the Republican governing agenda, but they had a personal problem with Donald Trump for one reason or another. And you saw that reflected in results in several states.
Yeah, looking back, Florida was called pretty early for Trump, and he did better than the polls had suggested. What happened there?
Well, I think polls everywhere failed. It looked like to me the polls were able to correctly pick up Democratic vote share. They about got Biden's numbers right. But where they weren't able to pick it up was in Republican vote share. They continued to underestimate Trump. They underestimated Republican Senate candidates. They underestimated the margins, and they frankly, I think, underestimated the number of Republicans who would turn out on Election Day. I think the polling industry, the forecasting industry, needs to do some soul searching about why that is. Why can they find the Democrats, but they can't find the Republicans? It's quite obvious that there are some shy Trump or Republican voters out there who either won't talk to pollsters or won't tell them the truth for one reason or another. We have to be honest with ourselves about that.
Let's talk about Georgia. It obviously is at least a little more blue than we've seen in the past. And at this point, it's so close that the Secretary of State there in Georgia is now planning a recount. What do you think happened in that state, and what can we expect from the recount process?
Well, Biden did well among some emerging Democratic populations, largely college-educated white people in the suburbs. He also did quite well among a higher turnout among minority voters, although I would point out that in the national exit polls, Trump actually improved himself among Black voters, among Hispanic voters. In fact, the only demographic cohort nationally where Trump saw a degradation was among white men, which was totally defied the conventional wisdom. But in Georgia, you have younger voters. You have these suburban populations that did flow away from Trump. We start to see this happening in the 2018 midterms. That went a little further in Georgia in 2020. You also saw the same phenomenon around the Phoenix suburbs, around the suburbs and a lot of the bigger cities. And so it all came to a perfect storm in Georgia. I think in the recount, most of the time recounts don't change the results of elections. But I do think the Trump campaign deserves to have every vote counted. So does the Biden campaign, by the way. And they also both of them deserve to avail themselves of every legal process that exists so that everyone has confidence that it was a free, fair, and fully counted election.
All right, so let's get into some of the legal challenges. Explain briefly President Trump's legal challenges right now and his claims that we saw on Thursday night that this is a fraudulent process.
Well, first of all, there's no evidence that it's fraudulent, and the president saying that is not accurate. Now, there may be pockets or incidents of fraud that come out over the course of this count, but to steal a national election would require a massive conspiracy on the scale that even a Hollywood movie producer wouldn't accept for a script. I mean, you'd be talking about huge numbers of people conspiring to steal hundreds of thousands of votes. That doesn't mean there won't be mistakes and there won't be isolated incidents, but I just find it unlikely that there's widespread fraud that would have caused him to lose all these states that he's apparently lost. Regarding his legal strategy, I'm not a lawyer, but based on what I've read, I can't really explain it. In some places, he wants to stop the count, and in other places, I would assume, like Arizona, he wanted to keep the count going. At the time he was asking to stop the counting, if they had stopped the counting, Joe Biden would have been the president-elect at that moment. So I don't truly understand what they're doing. It strikes me they're throwing a lot of things against the wall to see what sticks, but none of it seems like a terribly organized strategy that would be designed to change what the results of the election apparently are.
In terms of the fraudulent claims, we've seen a few Republicans back Trump on this so far. And then, of course, some say, similar to what you have, that it's irresponsible to attack on democracy, that it's not true. What can we expect from Republicans overall on this issue moving forward if Trump continues to make these claims?
Well, I think what you're going to hear most Republicans say, it won't be uniform, but I think what most Republicans say, and I think you're seeing this out of a lot of Senate Republicans, is a few things. Number one, every legal vote should be counted. Number two, both campaigns should be free to avail themselves of any legal processes that exist to adjudicate claims. Then judges should look at all the claims and handle the ones that are valid and throw out the ones that aren't. And then once all the votes are counted and all the claims are adjudicated, we'll have a result. I think it may take a few days, may take a few weeks. It's not uncommon for very close elections to have contests that take a few weeks. But at the end of the day, I think what most Republicans want is for everything to be followed to the letter of the law, both in terms of counting and in terms of adjudicating claims. And look, if the Trump people come up with something that's real, that ought to be looked at. But if they don't, we cannot hold up announcing the winner of a presidential election over claims of fraud that don't have evidence behind them or a legal basis to exist.
Finally, what do you think the results say about America today?
Well, I've heard a lot of people say that we're, more divided than ever, but I actually have a different view. I think what Americans said is that they want the two parties to work together and they don't want either party to have too much power. I mean, obviously, people went out and elected a Democratic president, but Republicans did quite well in the legislative elections, the congressional elections, and the state elections. And so that tells me that Americans don't mind divided government and that they would prefer it if the two parties could find a way to compromise and get along. I find it interesting that Democrats are disappointed in all this. I think they thought a landslide was going to give them a mandate to do a lot of progressive policies. Well, that's not happening. Americans clearly repudiated progressivism. They repudiated identity politics. And they said, look, we want both parties to have some power. And I interpret that as meaning they want the parties to work together. That didn't happen a lot during the Trump years, but hopefully it can happen in the next couple of years. I think it would benefit the incumbents in both parties to heed these warnings. I think it would help them all get reelected in the midterms and in 4 years if they interpreted the results the way I did.
But we are not done yet. Still ahead, we hear how Democrats are feeling with Biden in the lead, why it came down to the states it did, and what to watch for next that will determine which party controls the Senate. But first, let's take a moment to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Just Egg. Just Egg is convenient, protein-packed, and scrambles and cooks just like eggs. Yet it's completely plant-based. And yes, that's possible. Just Egg is made from mung beans and uses 98% less water and emits 93% fewer carbon emissions than a conventional egg. And again, it has just as much protein as a regular egg. You can make an omelet, scrambled eggs, French toast, pad thai, you name it, all with Just Egg. I've already been impressed with the scrambled eggs I've made, and I'm excited to try more recipes. They even have a super convenient toaster-ready version that is perfect for grab and go or for an easy-to-make breakfast sandwich. In fact, Just Egg is now the #1 fastest growing egg brand in the US. You can get Just Egg now on Amazon Prime Now, or Instacart, or at Whole Foods, your local grocery store or co-op in the egg aisle or frozen section. Just Egg, a better egg for you and the planet. Thank you, Just Egg, for sponsoring this podcast. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Apostrophe. Apostrophe is a prescription skincare company that connects you with a dermatologist online who can prescribe you products to meet your skincare goals. Simply fill out Apostrophe's online questionnaire about your skin concerns and medical history. Then just snap a few makeup-free selfies, and your board-certified dermatologist will get back to you within 24 hours with a truly customized treatment plan. I had a great experience with this. It was easy. I heard back from the dermatologist quickly, and she answered all of my questions. Then, before long, I had my new dermatologist-recommended skincare routine show up at my doorstep. It made the whole process affordable and easy. So get your first visit with a board-certified dermatologist at apostrophe.com for only $5 when you use our code NEWSWORTHY. This code is only available to our listeners, so to get started, go to apostrophe.com and click Begin Visit, then use the code NEWSWORTHY at sign-up, and you'll get your dermatology visit for only $5. That's APOSTROPHE, apostrophe.com, and use that code NEWSWORTHY to get your dermatology visit for only $5. Okay, now back to the episode. It's time for my conversation with Democratic strategist Emily Tish Sussman. Hi, Emily. Thanks for coming on the Newsworthy.
Thanks so much for having me.
It was predicted it would come down to the handful of states that we ultimately saw it came down to. Why those states?
Those states get all the attention. They get all the election attention. They get all the election spending. Some of them because there's a mixture of registration in Democrats and Republicans in the state, like pretty even. That's about like in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. But then there were states that we really thought were going to be in play this year and turned out to be. And that was like Arizona and North Carolina. It turns out also Georgia, Florida, less so. But a lot of that is because of what we call the expanding electorate. The new American majority, like people who are coming in, people of color, young people are coming into these states and coming in strong and saying, I want to organize in my community. And it's because of the work of these organizers that the states really, these have not flipped overnight. It has been deep organizing and consistent investments in each of these states, which has really turned them from Republican strongholds to swing states, now to Democratic states.
As of this recording, Friday afternoon, Biden has a lead in a pretty clear path to victory, but it's not called yet. What's the feeling among Democrats right now?
Pretty excited. Democrats are excited to have a president that we can work with, excited to have a president who's going to push forward values that we know are going to help actual people. Like, we need pandemic relief. We need economic relief. Like, we need a national child care program. We need healthcare that works for more people. We need an EPA that actually keeps our clean air and clean water when it gets it in places we don't even have it yet. So we're excited about the possibility.
On the flip side, let's talk about Congress. A lot of Democrats were hoping for a so-called blue wave, and it's really looking like the balance of power will pretty much stay the same in Congress. Democrats have the majority in the House. Republicans are at least very close to keeping power in the Senate. What happened there?
The balance of power in the Senate is probably going to end up coming down to runoffs, both in Georgia. So all eyes on Georgia. Wild. But yes, there was an expectation that the votes against Trump would have long coattails and that would keep a lot of the Republican congressional districts that had elected Democrats in 2018 midterms would vote to keep those Democratic members of Congress in them. And some of them did. And I think that's worth noting, that actually more of them did than did not. There was certainly a hope that with a national momentum to be voting for Democrats up and down the ticket, that it would keep them across the board. And that just wasn't the case. I think it actually really changes district by district. They're very different in the districts that lost. Like, the member of Congress from Staten Island, New York lost, as well as from the Keys in Florida, as well as Oklahoma City. So they're very different geographies. The thing that they do have in common is that they were districts that had voted for Trump. But I think it's a little bit early to do like a real analysis on that one yet.
And just to clarify on Georgia, just explaining to people, those 2 seats in Georgia could either give Democrats the majority or not.
Literally. It will literally either give Democrats the majority or keep Republicans as the majority. And the reason the majority matters in the Senate and then in the House as well. It's not just because you then have a majority to pass legislation, but actually the party that's in the majority controls the agenda. They control what pieces of legislation come up for a vote at all. So if you're in the minority, you can't even get your bills voted on. There used to be, a little bit more of like a compromise or a trade-off, but it's just become so partisan in the last couple of years that the party that's in the majority controls it all.
President Trump has filed some lawsuits against some of these state laws, some of the processes, and he's calling the whole thing a fraud in some of these battleground states. Give us your brief take on why he's making those claims and what you think could actually come from some of these legal challenges, if anything.
I'm very distressed about the state of our democracy and the faith in our democracy and the faith in our system when the president of the United States is making baseless claims and filing bogus lawsuits that are getting thrown out by judges right and left. That is very concerning to me. It is PR. It is getting his base riled up, trying to validate for them. When he used the words in his press conference from the White House, and he used the words, the legal votes had come in for him, that is extremely distressing to me. All of the votes that have come in are legal votes. The lawsuits themselves, some of them are to stop the counting, which actually doesn't make a ton of sense because then he would probably lose if he did that. They are truly bogus lawsuits, and it's more about PR than it is about legality.
Estimates about how long some of these legal challenges could go on?
Well, there's all these minute pieces of the election process that were just formalities before that kind of might matter now. It's like when the electors meet of the Electoral College, when Congress certifies the votes from the electors. Those are pieces that might actually matter. The piece that's in the Constitution is that the inauguration will happen in January. And so that we better have a decision by then. In fact, we will have a decision by then. But he said, Trump had said that he was going to take it to the Supreme Court. Well, he actually needs to appeal all of these cases up. So that's the outer limits of the timeline that he could keep on going. Kind of feels like he knows that he's losing and is looking for an out. So maybe he actually will just drop the lawsuits and accept the loss. But hey, anything could happen, I guess.
What do you think the results of this presidential race say about how divided America is right now?
The sources of news truly concern me, and what people consider to be experts. That I think is the biggest concern for me. Well, I mean, there's a lot of concerns, but just I don't know how we get to a less divided place when we are just looking at totally separate sources of experts, sources of expertise, sources of news.
Is there anything else you want to add or a final takeaway for the audience?
Ultimately, this is not about a win-loss and in your face, wagging your finger. This is really about governing with policies for the country at a time that we need it so much, and having a president who really takes people's concerns seriously and will come up with policies that are actually going to help people. And I know that President-elect Biden will be that person.
And you can learn more about both of our guests in today's episode notes on thenewsworthy.com. As always, we'll keep you updated on all the election happenings and more news to know in about 10 minutes each weekday, Monday through Friday. Don't forget, you can get ad-free episodes by becoming a Newsworthy Insider. Just go to thenewsworthy.com/insider to learn more. Thanks again for joining us. I'll be back on Monday with your next news roundup. Until then, have a great weekend.